Russia had its own Pussy Riot moment. What do you think of Donald Trump's Pussy Riot moment?
Well, I don't know whether this would. English is not my mother tongue. I don't know whether I would be. I would sound. Decent. There are so many pussies around your presidential campaign on both sides that I prefer not to comment about this.
Oh my goodness. I wasn't expecting that. That's going in. All right. Thank you again.
Wow. There's a bit of truth for you by Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Hi, everybody. I'm Joe Joseph. This is your daily Sheeple.com daily news update. And man, you want to talk about somebody telling the truth. That was it. And I want to start off tonight by going over a article by SHTFplan.com. Russia fires nuclear-ready ballistic missiles, increasing tensions with the U.S. Now, you remember a couple of days ago, we saw some news about the United States test firing a couple of nuclear, of course they were inert, but nuclear missiles in the Nevada area. Well, it looks like Russia has gone and done the same thing, only this time they're using submarines to do it. And the article starts out, got nuclear war? Russia is clearly prepared for it and ready to send a message to the belligerent American policy hacks who've been continuously egging things on. And that is exactly what's going on, folks. With diplomatic ties between the U.S. and Russia at their lowest point since the end of the Cold War, it's difficult not to take notice of how rapidly Putin and his generals are preparing for all-out war. And they may have it. Most recently, Russia test-fired 3 nuclear-capable ballistic missiles from submarines in the Sea of Okhotsk and the Barents Sea, as well as one from an island location. This, according to the international news. And the message is clear. U.S. misleaders have gone far enough in provoking, with their provoking actions regarding Syria and the Ukraine. And that's exactly what's going on. I mean, what do you expect when you start putting missiles on the border of another country? They're gonna have a problem with this. If you remember 1961, when Russia tried to put missiles on Cuba, what did President Kennedy do? Did he just sit around and say, yeah, you know what? No problem, Russia. Nah, it's okay. You guys go ahead and do what you want to do. It's no big deal. Of course, there's going to be some sort of move to counter that. And that's exactly what's going on here. So these strong words, and they are strong, when a Russian foreign minister goes and basically not only calls our election a mockery, because that's what it is. It's absolutely a mockery of any sort of semblance of a true election. God only knows when the last time we've had a real true election. But, this is a circus. It's absolutely crazy. And then you couple this with a great article that SHTF Plan came out with today, that United Nations soldiers say they will soon occupy America, going door to door, taking guns or shooting to kill. Now, this is interesting because we've heard this type of rhetoric now for a very long time, to the point where a lot of alt media thinks, and a lot of people that read alt media think this might be a boy who cried wolf situation. However, you have to take note of all of the equipment that's being pre-staged throughout the country. You have to remember that there are a lot of foreign troops that are always training here all the time, in cooperative efforts with our military. And the article here goes on to say, we have previously noted that recent allegations of Russian hacking could mean the Department of Homeland Security will be charged with protecting the presidential election in November. And the Department of Defense and U.S. military may now be joining that. If you remember last night on the Daily News Update, I brought that up too. This is unprecedented. To have the DOD and U.S. military involved in the elections, first of all, it's completely and totally wrong. They should never be involved in any sort of election. It doesn't matter what's going on, because they have no place anywhere in this country in any sort of capacity, in an active duty capacity. It should not happen. Violates posse comitatus in every way, shape, or form. And it continues, it says, consider what might happen should a particular candidate be elected to the presidency only to have the Department of Homeland Security, DOD, or United Nations overturn the vote. And when we say particular candidate, we are, of course, referring to Donald Trump. With well over 50 million Americans supporting him for the presidency, if he were to win a decisive victory and then have that victory overturned because of national security issues, one can only imagine the outcry. Protests and riots, of course, would surely follow. And the narrative has been created at the very highest levels of the American political hierarchy. And it's not so hard to envision a scenario such as this playing out. You know, this is something that we've talked about for years and years and years. And, you know, eventually, this is what's going to happen. We always say, man, it can't get much worse, you know. And let me tell you something. First of all, it can always get worse. It can always get worse. The fact is that we here in America are the last stand in the world. And the only reason why we are is because we still have our guns. And if they go to try and take the guns away, it's not going to be pretty. There's going to be a lot of people that just say, no, I'm not giving it up. And I would rather go out with a bang than to give up my guns or my rights. Those people aren't normally the ones that go and talk and speak about it openly, because that's not something that you speak about openly. But I can tell you there are a lot of people out there that would take that stand. Now, according to a recent alert posted on stevequail.com, the United Nations may already be preparing for such an outcome. And this is from, again, Steve Quayle's website. It says, this does not come from a high-level source, just an average, everyday Joe, but a guy that works in the same industry that always gave a hard time about the tinfoil hat stuff, recently returned from a Great Divide concert at which a gentleman just passing by stopped to mingle with a group of people. And they had a couple of drinks, and this guy states he likes America. He likes the people. He wish he could dance like the Americans. Ha ha ha. But he stated that he'd been fighting beside U.S. troops over the past 6 to 7 years, and this is why he says he feels compelled to tell someone over here in the States of a little something. He said he's from Norway and that he would be back in 3 to 4 months as part of a UN force. And he said there was nothing he could do, but he felt compelled that he needed to say something just to let such good people know what's coming. He said that they were going to be going door to door and taking guns or shooting to kill. And they had already had a list of names and addresses. Now, I don't know if that's accurate, but it's certainly something that, is it totally unbelievable? I don't think it's totally unbelievable. I don't think it's achievable personally. And I know that as much as we saw in Katrina, that active duty military could go and do something like that, going door to door. I think that you would have a problem at some point, especially if you try to do it on a national level. At that point, I think that, having to turn a gun on cousins and uncles and brothers and friends and all that would be a problem. And that's why you would need foreign troops to do it, ones that have no tie to this kind of stuff. And there have been a lot of movements. If you look on YouTube, you will find a ton of people, citizen reporters, reporting on, wow, what are all these UN transports being staged at this abandoned warehouse, or these convoys carrying UN vehicles all over the country. So you have to ask these questions. This is not tinfoil hattery. This is responsible people asking needed questions to provide those checks and balances. Even though it may make you uncomfortable, or may make other people uncomfortable, you have to ask these questions as to why we have so much foreign military equipment in this country and why there are these troop movements and why you have these soldiers that are saying these kind of things. It's a responsible thing. The alternative is to put your head in the sand. And we know what happens when a country sticks its head in the sand is they get taken over. And again, we're the last bastion of freedom in this world. You know, there's no other places for anybody else to go. If they have a problem, if they're being oppressed, normally it's the United States they look to come and seek relief. And if the United States goes away, then what happens? Where do people go? And that's it. We are the last thing standing in the way of the powers that shouldn't be. DailySheeple.com mirrored a great article by the Free Thought Project. Time to pay attention. In the last 48 hours, humanity just moved to the brink of world war. You know, honestly, folks, I think we're already there. Although we don't have that, quote, typical world war that you're looking at, like World War II and World War I, there certainly is a world war, whether you call it economic, whether you look at all of the proxy wars that are going on that the United States supports and other countries support. I mean, the world is in chaos more than I can ever remember it being in chaos. And again, these are things that you have to pay attention to, and you're not crazy for asking the questions. You have to get that into your head. Don't be afraid to ask the questions. Don't be afraid to bring it up to your friends, your family, and relatives, or, you know, coworkers, and feel like you might be a black sheep. You're going to be a black sheep. Whether you're a black sheep now or you're a black sheep later doesn't really matter. You know, the fact is you want to ask these questions and raise awareness to it now before it's too late. Because there comes a point in time when asking those questions later will have no effect at all. And that's a huge problem. Claire Burnish of the Free Thought Project writes, months of disquieting and needless escalation between the United States and Russia over Syria and the Asian Pacific theater quickened feverishly to near outright hostility over the past 48 hours. And considering semantics from both ends suggestive of antebellum blame casting, it's past time to pay attention. I totally agree with her. It's also interesting to note that The Sun over in the UK has published an article. John Lockett published an article, Secret Terror Deal. Listen to this. America plotting to allow 9,000 ISIS fighters to escape terror capital Mosul so they can attack Russian troops. This according to Moscow. It says thousands of ISIS fighters are being given safe passage out of Iraq to fight in Syria. The jihadist army and their families will allegedly be let back into Syria to battle President Bashar al-Assad and his Russian allies. Now, these claims come as Britain and U.S. forces face criticism for failing to stop Assad and his brutal bombing of civilians in the Syrian city of Aleppo. Nearly 1,000 U.S. and British troops have been sent to retake Mosul, the largest city under ISIS control. If this is allowed to happen, you have to ask the question, if we are in a war against ISIS, then why are we giving anybody safe passage? You know? And if we're in a war against ISIS, when did we declare war? When did Congress do that? That's a very good question to ask as well, because we haven't, and we haven't in quite some time. But the best boogeyman is a boogeyman with no face and no borders, and where they just let fear rule the day. And that's exactly what's going on. But it would not surprise me in the least, these shysters in the executive branch, to go ahead and foster a deal with the devil. So that's very interesting as well. Look, at our foreign policy is in shambles, and it's been in shambles for quite some time. But the only way that we're going to see change in this country is outrage, and a lot of focused outrage, not just at our non-representing representatives in our executive branch, but also at the media for being horribly complicit in these crimes. And let me tell you, folks, whether you're Russian, whether you're Syrian, whether you're Iraqi, whether you're Iranian, whether you're Chinese, you're human beings. And the only way to break through this is with love. Love for your fellow man. And fighting for the truth. Shine light on this darkness that has enveloped the earth. Because that is exactly what it is. Let's call it for what it is. In other news, thedailymail.com has an article about how many times a day do you shout at your PC? Researchers say that average Americans suffer 40,000 bouts of tech rage over their lifetime. This, of course, is because people have become so addicted to the culture of convenience and having their smart devices and their computers and, everything at the touch of a finger, at the touch, you can go and order stuff instantly. Sometimes same-day delivery for free now, if you live in a metro area, you got Amazon Prime, heck, they'll have a drone drop it off. This is where we are now, and people just don't have the patience, and they've become addicted to this kind of stuff. This is bad. Again, I'm not anti-technology at all, but when it affects human behavior in this way, shape, or form, then we have cause for concern. It also is right in line with these WikiLeaks emails about how the Clinton administration wants to foster an environment where the public has continued to be dumbed down. Look at the work of Charlotte Iserby. If you don't know who Charlotte Iserby is, take a look online, Google search her name, look up the deliberate dumbing down of America. She was in President Reagan's Department of Education, and she wrote a book on this, a very telling book. And this has been a plan for quite some time. If you take a look at the Reese Commission and the work of Norman Dodd, you'll find that this conspiracy against the American people goes back to the late 1800s. That they wanted to hijack the education system to bring about complicit sheep, to bring about an acceptance of prison culture. And that's exactly what we have here. Again, I've said it before, I'll say it again. The only way that we can win this battle is through education. And I'm not talking about sending your kids to school. It goes so much deeper than that. It means taking responsibility, personal responsibility for your children, and ensuring that they have the tools that they need to become responsible adults that will continue this fight. Because generations past have just trusted government to handle these things. And now what we have is a population of sheep. Or as Sergei Lavrov says, pussies. And that's exactly what it is. The wussification of this country. Men are not men anymore. And it's time for men to man up. And that doesn't mean marching on Washington or anything like that, because that's not what it takes. It takes a man to not do that. It takes a man to stand up and do the right thing. It takes a man to call these people on the carpet for what it is and use your intelligence and your intellect to overcome these issues. And that's exactly what we need now. Our final article of the night, and this is a great website here, localorg.blogspot.com. I just came about them, and they're talking about 10 things that we should do instead of obsessing over these elections. Because again, folks, as important as elections appear to be, you're seeing through the leaks of these emails that there's absolutely no chance that you're going to have a fair election, that they're going to push relentlessly to get their person in. And really, it's totally and completely irrelevant in the grand scheme of things who wins, because even if your guy gets in, they still have to deal with a Congress that's bought and paid for by special interest. You still have to deal with a judiciary branch that's bought and paid for by special interest, or are just so politically slanted from one side or the other that you're not going to get justice. It's crazy. So they give 10 things to focus on. Couple things. Start a local organic farm, and they give a nice website, the urbanfarmer.co. Gives you guidance to start an organic farm. Takes a year or two to do it, and might be something to consider. Also, visit your local makerspace or hackerspace to learn a new skill. Robert Steele, a former CIA agent, talks about that extensively. If you look up his interviews on YouTube, the guy is brilliant and talks about how to combat these issues that we face and do it in an organized manner. I would check that out. Also, use the new skill to start a local business or replace disrupting and established monopolies. Small business, mom and pops, very hard to get off the ground, but entrepreneurship is at an all-time low in this country, and we need to see it come back. Also, replace a percentage of your power consumption with solar. The more that you can become self-sufficient, of course, the better off you'll be. And you can go and check out the rest of this over at localorg.blogspot.com. Folks, we face a tremendous uphill battle, and there's no easy solution to the problem. But starting with education and having the cojones to go to your coworkers, to your friends, to your family, and confront them on these issues is pivotal now more than any time before. So I implore you, please do the research, put in the time, and get out there and fight before it's too late. I'm Joe Joseph. This is your daily news update brought to you by thedailysheeple.com. You can like us and subscribe to this YouTube channel today. Thank you, folks. Have a good day.